There are some things a man builds with his bare hands that can never truly be destroyed. But William Hartley didn't know that yet. Not on the night he stood in his driveway at 73 years old, watching flames consume everything he'd spent 40 years creating, while his children stood 3 states away, completely unaware that the home they grew up in was turning to ash. The house on Maple Ridge Road wasn't just wood and nails. It was William's promise, made on a humid June evening in 1983, when he'd driven his young wife Margaret past the empty lot for the first time. She was 6 months pregnant with their first child, her hand resting on her belly, and when she saw those 3 acres of overgrown grass with the oak tree in the corner, she turned to him with tears in her eyes and said, "This is where our babies should grow up." William had been a carpenter's apprentice back then, 29 years old with calloused hands and a wallet that was usually more empty than full. The land cost everything they'd saved, plus a loan from Margaret's father that William swore he'd pay back within 5 years. He did it in 4. But buying the land was the easy part. Building the house, that was something else entirely. William didn't hire contractors or architects. He couldn't afford them. Instead, he bought a stack of books on home construction, borrowed tools from his boss, and started digging the foundation himself on weekends. Margaret would bring him lemonade and sit on an overturned bucket, watching him work, telling him about the color she wanted for the kitchen walls, the porch swing she imagined hanging on the front deck, and the room where their children would learn to walk. The first wall went up 3 weeks before their daughter Emily was born. William remembered that day with perfect clarity. He'd been hammering in the last support beam when Margaret called from the car, her voice tight with pain, saying they needed to go. Now. He'd driven 90 miles an hour to the hospital, his hands still covered in sawdust, and 6 hours later he held his daughter for the first time, whispering a promise into her tiny ear, "Daddy's building you a castle, sweetheart. A place where you'll always be safe." It took William 3 years to finish the house. 3 years of dawn starts and midnight finishes, of splinters and sore muscles, of learning through mistakes that sometimes cost him weeks of work. But slowly, room by room, the house took shape. A living room with windows facing east, so Margaret could watch the sunrise with her morning coffee. A kitchen with enough counter space for baking, because Margaret had started a small business making pies for local restaurants. 3 bedrooms upstairs, because by then they had Emily and 2-year-old Thomas, and Margaret was pregnant again with little Sophie. The oak tree that had first caught Margaret's eye became the anchor of their backyard, and William built a tree house in its branches, spending 2 full weekends making sure every board was secure and every nail hammered flush. He carved each of his children's names into the wooden railing, along with the dates they were born. Emily, Thomas, Sophie. Those names would weather and fade over the years, but they never disappeared. The house wasn't perfect. The hallway on the 2nd floor sloped slightly because William had misjudged the foundation measurements. The bathroom door never quite closed all the way. In winter, the heating system made a rattling sound that kept everyone awake until they got used to it. But it was theirs. Every imperfection was a memory, every crooked corner was a lesson learned. Margaret decorated each room with pieces she found at estate sales and thrift stores. She had an eye for seeing beauty in forgotten things. A mirror with a chipped frame became the centerpiece of their entryway. A wooden rocking chair with a broken runner got fixed and placed in Sophie's nursery. She painted the kitchen walls yellow, just like she'd imagined, and hung photographs everywhere. The house became a gallery of their life together. But what William remembered most wasn't the construction or the decorating. It was the sounds that filled those walls. Emily's piano lessons echoed from the living room every Tuesday evening, the same scales repeated until they became melodies. Thomas's basketball bouncing in the driveway at dusk, the rhythmic thump-thump-thump that meant he was practicing free throws again, chasing some dream of high school glory. Sophie's laughter, bright and uncontained, spilled from whatever room she occupied. And underneath it all, Margaret's voice, calling the kids for dinner, singing along to the radio while washing dishes, reading bedtime stories in voices that brought characters to life. The house wasn't just shelter. It was the container for every ordinary moment that made a life extraordinary. Years passed the way they do when you're busy living them. One moment Emily was learning to tie her shoes on the front porch steps, and the next she was borrowing the car keys for her first date. Thomas went from the boy who cried over skinned knees to the teenager who spent hours in the garage with William, learning to restore a 1967 Mustang they'd bought at auction. Sophie painted murals on her bedroom walls, portraits of imaginary worlds that Margaret couldn't bring herself to paint over. The house absorbed it all. Thanksgiving dinners where Margaret's parents and siblings crowded around a table that wasn't quite big enough, plates balanced on laps, laughter drowning out the television. Christmas mornings when the living room disappeared under wrapping paper and the smell of cinnamon rolls filled every corner. Summer evenings when they'd sit on the porch William had built, watching fireflies and talking about nothing and everything. But life has a way of moving forward whether you're ready or not. Emily graduated high school with honors and a scholarship to a university 800 miles away. William helped her pack the car, carrying boxes up 3 flights of stairs to a dorm room the size of their bathroom. When he hugged her goodbye, she whispered, "I miss home already," and William had to turn away so she wouldn't see him crying. Thomas left next, chasing a football scholarship to a college in California. The morning he left, William found him sitting in the treehouse at dawn, just sitting there in silence. When William climbed up to join him, Thomas said, "I used to think I'd live here forever. Weird how things change." They sat together for an hour, not saying much, both knowing something irreplaceable was ending. Sophie was the last, and her departure hit Margaret the hardest. Sophie had stayed close for college, only 2 hours away, coming home most weekends with laundry and stories. But after graduation, she got a job offer in New York City. The night before she left, Margaret and Sophie stayed up until 3 in the morning in the kitchen, talking and crying and laughing, the way mothers and daughters do when they're trying to hold on to something that's already slipping away. The house became quieter. Not empty, never empty, because Margaret and William were still there. But different. The piano sat untouched. The basketball hoop developed rust. Sophie's bedroom remained exactly as she'd left it, a shrine to a time that existed now only in memory. William tried to fill the silence with projects. He repainted the exterior, replaced the roof tiles, built new shelves in the garage. Margaret started volunteering at the library and taking watercolor classes. They learned how to be just the two of them again, rediscovering the people they'd been before they became parents. And they were content. Not ecstatic, not desperate, but content. They video called with the kids every Sunday. Emily had gotten married, and they'd flown out for the wedding, William walking his daughter down an aisle in a city he didn't know, giving her away to a man who seemed decent enough. Thomas was coaching high school football and talking about proposing to his girlfriend. Sophie was thriving in her advertising career, sending pictures of her tiny apartment with its view of the city lights. The house on Maple Ridge Road had served its purpose. It had been the foundation for 3 lives that were now being built elsewhere, and William and Margaret were proud of that. The house had done its job. But then came the phone call that changed everything. Margaret had been feeling tired. More than tired. Exhausted in a way that sleep didn't fix. She'd mentioned it to William a few times, but they'd both chalked it up to age. They were in their 60s now. Fatigue was part of the package. But when she started having trouble catching her breath after simple tasks, and when she began losing weight without trying, William insisted she see a doctor. She'd resisted at first, the way stubborn people do, insisting she was fine, it was nothing, and she just needed more rest. But William had learned, after 35 years of marriage, how to push when pushing mattered. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday afternoon in October. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Advanced. Aggressive. The oncologist, a kind woman with tired eyes, explained the treatment options with careful words, but William heard what she wasn't saying. Time was measured now. Not in years or even months necessarily. The word palliative kept appearing in the conversation. Margaret cried in the car on the way home. William held her hand and drove carefully, like the world had become more fragile, like sudden movements might shatter what remained. When they pulled into the driveway, Margaret looked at the house and said, "I'm not ready to leave this place." "I'm not ready to leave you." "Then don't," William said, though they both knew that wasn't how it worked. They told the children on a video call that evening. The hardest conversation of William's life was watching his children's faces crumble on a screen, being unable to hold them, to absorb some of their pain. Emily said she'd take time off work and come home. Thomas said the same. Sophie was already crying too hard to speak. "No," Margaret had said, her voice firm despite the tears streaming down her face. "You have lives. Jobs. Emily, you're pregnant. You can't just leave. I'll be fine. We'll visit. This is what phones and airplanes are for." But William saw the fear in her eyes that night after they'd ended the call. The way she moved through the house, touching door frames and countertops, like she was trying to memorize the texture of her own life. They made love that night, gently, carefully, both crying, both holding on to each other like shipwreck survivors. The chemotherapy started 2 weeks later. Margaret was determined to fight, to squeeze every possible day from whatever time remained. She lost her hair, lost more weight, had days where she couldn't get out of bed, where the pain made her whimper despite the medications. But she also had good days, when she'd sit on the porch swing William had hung 40 years ago, wrapped in blankets, watching the seasons change on those 3 acres she'd fallen in love with. William became a caretaker. He learned to give injections, manage pill schedules, and recognize the signs of good days versus bad days. He cooked meals she could barely eat. He held her hair when she was sick. He lay beside her on the nights when the pain was worst and she couldn't sleep, telling her stories about when they were young, about the day he'd first asked her to dance, and about the morning he'd realized he wanted to marry her. The children visited when they could. Emily came twice, her belly growing with William's first grandchild. Thomas flew in for a long weekend, spending most of it sitting with his mother, holding her hand while they watched old movies. Sophie tried to come home every month, bringing work with her, setting up her laptop at the kitchen table so she could be near. But distance is distance. They had their own lives now, their own responsibilities, and their own worlds that didn't revolve around Maple Ridge Road anymore. And William understood that. He did. That's what they'd wanted, what every parent wants. For their children to build their own lives, their own houses, and their own promises. It just meant that when the hard moments came, when Margaret cried from pain at 3 in the morning, when she had setbacks that scared them both, it was mostly just William and Margaret, together in the house they'd built, facing the thing they couldn't fix. Margaret died on a Sunday morning in early spring, with William holding her hand and sunlight streaming through the bedroom windows. Her last words were, "You gave me such a beautiful life." Then she closed her eyes, took a breath that didn't lead to another, and was gone. The funeral was well attended. All 3 children came, bringing pieces of their own lives, Emily with her new baby, Thomas with his fiancée, and Sophie alone but surrounded by friends who'd driven up to support her. Margaret's siblings, cousins, neighbors, people from church, people from her pie-baking business, and people from 40 years of building a life in a small community were there. They buried her in the cemetery on the edge of town, under a maple tree, with a headstone William had spent weeks choosing. After the service, people gathered at the house on Maple Ridge Road, filling it with noise and casseroles and stories about Margaret. Emily played the piano for the first time in years. Thomas stood in the driveway, bouncing a basketball. Sophie sat in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by her old murals, trying to remember what it felt like to be young enough to believe in imaginary worlds. Then they left. Emily is back to her new baby and her own home. Thomas to his coaching job and wedding plans. Sophie to her city lights and career. They each asked William to come stay with them. Emily had a guest room. Thomas could clear out his home office. Sophie's apartment was small, but she'd make it work. "I'm fine here," William told them. "This is my home." And it was. But it was also a museum now, every corner holding ghosts. Margaret's coffee cup still sat on the kitchen counter. Her reading glasses are on the nightstand. Her clothes in the closet, still carrying the faint scent of her perfume. William couldn't bring himself to move anything. He fell into a routine. Wake up. Make coffee. Sit on the porch. Work on small projects around the house. Video call with the kids on Sundays. Go to bed. Repeat. The grief was a presence, heavy and constant, but he carried it because that's what you do. You carry what you have to carry. 6 months passed like that. Then 7. William was managing. Not thriving, but managing. Then came the night everything changed. William had been watching television, dozing off in his recliner the way he often did around 9 o'clock. A habit Margaret used to tease him about. He woke to the smell of smoke. Not faint. Strong. Acrid. His eyes snapped open, and he saw it. Flames in the kitchen, already spreading across the ceiling, moving with terrifying speed. Later, the fire marshal would determine it was faulty wiring in the walls, old electrical work that William had done himself 40 years ago, back when he was learning as he went. A short circuit. Bad luck. These things happen in old houses. But in that moment, William didn't think about causes. He thought about getting out. He moved faster than he moved in years, stumbling toward the front door through smoke that was already thick and choking. His lungs burned. His eyes watered. He couldn't see clearly, just shapes and shadows and orange light. He made it to the porch, gulping fresh air, coughing until he thought his ribs would crack. Then he turned and looked back at the house. Flames were visible now through the kitchen windows. Smoke poured from gaps in the roof. The fire was growing, spreading, and consuming. William pulled out his phone with shaking hands and called 911. The dispatcher's voice was calm and professional, telling him to stay away from the structure and that help was coming. He could hear sirens already, that distinctive wail getting closer. But William wasn't thinking about help. He was thinking about what was inside. 40 years of photographs. Margaret's paintings. The children's baby books. Emily's piano. The treehouse blueprints. Thomas's football trophies. Sophie's murals. Every piece of physical evidence that they'd been a family, that they'd been happy, that this house had been full of love. He took a step toward the front door. The heat stopped him before he even reached the porch steps. It rolled out of the doorway like a living thing, a wall of temperature that made the air shimmer and distort. William stood there, 1 foot raised, his body screaming at him to move forward, his mind knowing it would be suicide. A neighbor, old Frank Morrison from 2 houses down, appeared at William's side, grabbing his arm. "Don't you dare, Bill. Don't you even think about it." "The photos," William said, his voice breaking. "All the photos of Margaret. The kids. Everything." "It's just stuff," Frank said, holding tight. "You can't replace yourself." But it wasn't just stuff. William knew that. Frank knew that. They both stood there, Frank's hand on William's arm, both of them watching as the fire trucks arrived, as firefighters in heavy gear unrolled hoses and shouted coordinates, as water arced through the air and turned to steam against the flames. The living room windows exploded outward from the heat. William flinched at the sound, like something inside him was breaking too. He could see the piano now, through the shattered window, flames dancing across its keys. The same piano where Emily had practiced those scales every Tuesday evening. Where Margaret used to sit and play hymns on Christmas morning. Where Thomas had attempted to learn chopsticks and given up after 2 lessons, declaring he'd stick to sports. The fire chief, a woman named Rodriguez who'd been in Sophie's graduating class, came over after 20 minutes. Her face was streaked with soot and sweat. "Mr. Hartley, I'm sorry. The fire's too advanced. We're doing what we can, but the structure's compromised. We're focusing on containment now, making sure it doesn't spread to the woods." William nodded. He couldn't speak. His throat felt like he'd swallowed glass. "Do you have somewhere to go tonight?" Rodriguez asked. "Family nearby?" "My kids," William managed. "But they're far away." "You can stay with us," Frank said immediately. "Martha's already making up the guest bed." The fire burned for 3 hours. William watched all of it, refused to leave, and stood in his driveway with Frank beside him and a growing crowd of neighbors, all of them bearing witness to the dismantling of 40 years. The roof collapsed around midnight with a sound like the earth cracking open. The second floor fell into the first an hour later. By 2 in the morning, there was nothing left but the stone chimney William had laid himself, standing alone amid the rubble like a gravestone, and piles of smoking debris that used to be rooms, used to be memories, used to be home. The firefighters stayed until dawn, making sure nothing reignited. Rodriguez came back over as the sun started to rise, her face exhausted. "I'm truly sorry, Mr. Hartley. I know this house meant everything to you." William looked at the ruins. 40 years reduced to ash and twisted metal and broken stone. The oak tree in the backyard had survived, its branches scorched but intact. The treehouse was gone, burned away like it had never existed. Like Emily and Thomas and Sophie had never carved their names into that railing. Like none of it had been real. "Thank you for trying," William said quietly. He went home with Frank and Martha Morrison. They gave him their guest room, gave him some of Frank's clothes since William's were still reeking of smoke, and gave him space when he said he needed to be alone. He sat on their guest bed as the sun came up, still smelling smoke on his skin, and realized he needed to call his children. He called Emily first. She was 2 hours ahead, already up with the baby. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright. "Dad, this is early for you. Is everything okay?" William opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. "There was a fire," he finally said. The brightness drained from her voice instantly. "What? Where? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. But the house. The house is gone, sweetheart." The silence on the other end lasted 5 seconds that felt like 5 hours. Then Emily's voice came back, thick with tears. "Gone? What do you mean, gone?" "I mean, it burned down. Last night. Electrical fire. The firefighters tried, but..." William's voice cracked. "There's nothing left, Emily. Nothing." He heard her crying and heard her talking to someone in the background, probably her husband. Then she was back. "I'm coming home. Today. I'll get a flight." "Dad, are you safe?" "Where are you?" "I'm at the Morrisons. I'm okay. You don't need to." "I'm coming," she said firmly. "Don't argue with me." He called Thomas next. Thomas was still asleep. His voice was groggy when he answered. "Dad? It's like 5 in the morning here." "What's wrong?" William went through it again. The fire. The house. Everything is gone. He heard Thomas swear and heard the rustle of blankets as he sat up. "The whole house?" Thomas asked, disbelief in his voice. "The treehouse? My room? Everything?" "Everything," William confirmed. "Jesus, Dad? Thomas's voice broke. "I should have visited more. I should have been there more after Mom." "Don't do that," William said. "Don't turn this into guilt. You have your life. That's what your mother and I wanted." "I'm booking a flight," Thomas said. "I'll be there tomorrow." Sophie was the hardest call. She was always the most emotional of his children, the one who felt everything too deeply, who carried the world's weight on her shoulders. When William told her, she broke down completely, sobbing so hard she couldn't catch her breath. "The murals," she finally gasped out. "Oh God, Dad, the murals in my room. All my paintings. The kitchen Mom painted yellow. The porch swing. It's all really gone. All of it, honey." "I can't breathe," Sophie said. "Dad, I can't." "I'm coming home," Sophie said. "I'm leaving tonight. I don't care about work. I'm coming." After he hung up, William sat on the edge of the guest bed and let himself cry for the first time. Not quiet tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere ancient in his chest. He cried for Margaret, who'd never see another sunrise from those east-facing windows. He cried for the house that had held their entire lives. He cried for his children, who were losing their history piece by piece. He cried for himself, for being 73 years old and alone and homeless, and so tired of losing things. Frank found him 20 minutes later, brought him coffee, and sat beside him without saying anything. Sometimes that's the only thing you can do for someone. Just sit with them in their grief. Emily arrived that evening. She'd managed to get a last-minute flight, leaving the baby with her husband's mother, traveling alone for the first time since giving birth. She pulled up in a rental car just as dusk was settling, and when William saw her walking up the Morrisons' driveway, it hit him all over again. She looked so much like Margaret. Same eyes. The same determined set to her jaw. She hugged him hard enough to hurt, buried her face in his shoulder, and cried. "I'm so sorry, Daddy. I'm so sorry." They drove to Maple Ridge Road together, Emily behind the wheel because William's hands were shaking. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink, colors that should have been beautiful but just felt cruel. When they turned onto the street, Emily gasped. The ruins were worse in daylight's aftermath. The stone chimney stood like a monument in a graveyard. Everything else was just gone. Piles of charred wood. Twisted metal that used to be appliances. The front porch had collapsed into the foundation. The windows were all shattered. The oak tree in the back stood scorched and lonely. Emily parked on the street. They sat in the car for a long moment, either of them moving. "I learned to ride a bike in that driveway," Emily finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You ran beside me holding the seat, and then you let go and I didn't even realize it until I looked back and you were 20 feet behind me, cheering." "You were 6, William said, wearing a purple helmet with flowers on it. "I played my first recital in that living room," Emily continued, staring at the ruins. "I was so nervous I thought I'd throw up. Mom sat in the front row and smiled at me the whole time." They got out of the car slowly, walking toward what used to be the front yard. The smell of smoke was still strong and would be strong for weeks. Yellow caution tape surrounded the property. A sign from the fire department declared the structure unsafe. Emily walked to where the front door used to be, careful not to cross the tape. "Can we go in? Look around?" Rodriguez said. "It's not safe. The foundation's unstable." "I know, but..." Emily turned to look at him, tears streaming down her face. "There has to be something left. Something we can save." Thomas arrived the next morning, renting a car and driving straight from the airport. Sophie came in that afternoon, her eyes swollen from crying on the plane. And then all 4 of them stood together in what used to be their front yard, staring at the remains of their childhood. "We should call someone," Thomas said. "See if we can sift through it safely. Look for anything that survived." "The piano's metal frame might have made it," Emily said. "Photo albums, if they were in the right place. Maybe some of Mom's paintings." Sophie just shook her head. "It doesn't matter. Even if we find pieces, it won't be the same. It won't be home." William looked at his 3 children, all of them adults now, all of them successful and established in their own lives, and all of them broken by the loss of a place they hadn't lived in for years. And something shifted in his chest. Not healing, nothing could heal this yet. But a small crack in the grief, letting in a sliver of something else. Something he couldn't quite name yet. "Come on," he said. "Let's go get lunch. The Morrisons have been wonderful, but we're crowding their house." They went to the diner downtown, the same one where William used to take them for pancakes on Saturday mornings. The waitress, an older woman named Diane who'd been working there for 30 years, recognized them immediately. "I heard about the fire," she said, her eyes full of sympathy. "Bill, I'm so sorry. We all are. Your family, that house was special." Over lunch, they started talking. Not about the fire at first, but about memories. Emily told a story about the time she tried to bake Margaret a birthday cake and accidentally used salt instead of sugar. Thomas talked about the summer he'd broken his arm falling out of the treehouse and had been more worried about William being mad than about the pain. Sophie described the morning she'd woken up early to watch the sunrise from her bedroom window and had seen a family of deer grazing in the backyard. Story after story, memory after memory. The house was gone, but the stories remained. They lived in the spaces between words, in the laughter that interrupted the grief, in the way Emily reached over to squeeze Sophie's hand, and in the way Thomas kept looking at William to make sure he was okay. "We should do something," Emily said suddenly. To honor it. To honor Mom and the house and everything it meant. Like what? Sophie asked. I don't know. A memorial? Something to mark what was there. We could plant a garden, Thomas suggested. Where the house stood. Something living. Something that grows. William listened to his children's plan and watched them lean into each other, support each other, and love each other. And he realized something he should have seen earlier. He'd been so focused on what was lost, the physical structure, the tangible proof of their family's existence, that he missed what remained. That evening, they went back to the property. The sun was setting again, and the ruins looked somehow less devastating in the golden light. Or maybe William was just starting to see them differently. Emily had brought a notebook and was sketching ideas for the memorial garden. Thomas was on his phone, researching what kinds of plants grew best in their climate. Sophie was just standing there, looking at the oak tree, the only thing that had survived relatively intact. Can we get closer? Sophie asked. To the tree? Rodriguez had said the perimeter was safe, just not the foundation itself. So they ducked under the caution tape and walked carefully through the debris-strewn yard to the oak tree. Its leaves were gone, burned away, but the branches were solid. Scarred but alive. Sophie pressed her palm against the trunk. It survived. Out of everything, it survived. It was here first, William said. Before the house. It's what made your mother fall in love with this land. Tell us again, Emily said. About the day you showed Mom this property. So William did. He told them about Margaret's pregnant belly, about the way she'd cried when she saw the oak tree, and about the promise he'd made to build them a home. He told them about learning carpentry from books, about the mistakes he'd made, and about the day Emily was born when the first wall was barely standing. I wanted to give you all something permanent, William said, his voice catching. Something that would last. A foundation. A place you could always come back to. You did, Emily said softly. You gave us that. But now it's gone. No, Thomas said firmly. It's not. William looked at his son, confused. Thomas gestured around at the ruins. This is just wood and nails. What you gave us wasn't the building, Dad. It was everything that happened inside it. You can burn down walls, but you can't burn down memories. You can't destroy Sunday dinners or Christmas mornings or the feeling of being so completely loved that you don't even realize it's remarkable until you're older and you see how rare it is. Sophie nodded, tears streaming down her face. I didn't need the murals, Dad. I needed the fact that you and Mom let me paint them in the first place. That you looked at my weird, messy art and told me I was talented. That you made me feel like our house was a place where I could be exactly who I was. The piano didn't make me a musician, Emily added. You did. You and Mom. By showing up to every recital, by listening to me practice the same song 100 times, by making me believe that beauty was something worth creating. William felt something breaking open in his chest. Not grief this time. Something else. Something that felt almost like relief. I failed you, he said. I couldn't protect it. I couldn't save any of it. Dad, Emily said, taking his hand. Look around. Look at us. We're here. We came running the moment you needed us. Thomas left his team in the middle of the season. I left my baby. Sophie walked away from a major presentation. We dropped everything to be here because you taught us that family matters more than anything else. That's not failure. That's the most successful thing a parent can do. They stood together in a circle under the scarred oak tree, 4 people bound by blood and loss and something stronger than both. The sun finished setting, and stars began appearing in the darkening sky. The same stars that had looked down on this property for decades, that had witnessed the young couple's dreams, that had watched 3 children grow up, that had seen a man build something with his bare hands and then watched it burn. But the stars were still there. And so was the oak tree. And so were William, Emily, Thomas, and Sophie. What do we do now? Sophie asked quietly. William took a breath. He'd been asking himself that same question since the moment he'd woken up to smoke. What do you do when everything you've built is destroyed? When the life you carefully constructed falls apart? When loss strips you down to nothing but breath and heartbeat? We remember, William said. And then we keep going. The next week was practical and exhausting. Insurance adjusters came to assess the damage. A contractor friend of Frank's helped them safely sift through the ruins for anything salvageable. They found less than William had hoped but more than he'd feared. The metal frame of Emily's piano, warped but present. They hauled it out, and Emily cried over it like it was a body they'd recovered. A metal box from Margaret's closet that had protected some jewelry and a stack of letters William had written her during their engagement. 3 photo albums that had been in the basement, their covers charred but most of the pictures intact. Thomas's first football, somehow wedged in a corner that the fire hadn't fully consumed. A few of Sophie's paintings, the ones Margaret had framed and hung in the hallway, had shattered glass, but the images behind it were still visible. Small things. Random things. But each one felt like a miracle, like the universe giving back tiny pieces of what had been stolen. They also found Margaret's wedding ring, which William had placed on her dresser the night she died because he couldn't bear to wear it. The gold had melted and reformed into an unrecognizable shape, but it was hers, and William held it in his palm and cried with relief that at least this small piece of her hadn't been completely erased. Emily organized everything they found, creating an inventory, taking pictures, and storing items carefully. Thomas worked with the contractor to determine what could be done with the property. The foundation was destroyed and would need to be completely removed. The lot would essentially be starting from scratch. "What do you want to do, Dad?" Thomas asked one evening as they stood looking at the cleared foundation. "Do you want to rebuild? Sell the land? We'll support whatever you decide." William had been thinking about that question constantly. Part of him wanted to rebuild, to construct the house exactly as it had been, to recreate what was lost. But he knew that was impossible. You can't step in the same river twice. Even if he built an identical house, it wouldn't be the same. Margaret wouldn't be there. The children wouldn't be children. Time only moves forward. "I don't know yet," William admitted. "I need time to think." Sophie had been quieter than usual, spending long hours walking the property, sitting under the oak tree, sometimes sketching in a notebook she'd bought. On the 4th day, she showed William what she'd been working on. "It's a design," she said, spreading the notebook pages across the Morrisons' kitchen table. "For a memorial. Not just a garden, something bigger. A structure." William looked at the sketches. She'd drawn an open-air pavilion built around the oak tree. Benches surround it. A stone pathway. Places for flowers and plants. And at the center, a plaque with Margaret's name and dates. "This spot," Sophie said, pointing to the oak tree, "this is where it all started, right? Where Mom fell in love with the land. I thought we could make it a place people could visit. Us, but also the community. A place for reflection. For remembering." "It's beautiful," Emily said, leaning over to look. "It would cost money," Thomas added. "But we could split it. Between the insurance settlement and the 4 of us contributing, it's doable." William studied his daughter's sketches. The design was simple but elegant, honoring the past without trying to recreate it. Creating something new from the ashes of what was lost. It felt right in a way he couldn't fully articulate. "Yes," he said. "Let's do it." It took 3 months to build Sophie's vision. They hired local contractors, used materials sourced from regional suppliers, and involved the community in ways that surprised William. When word got out about what they were planning, donations started arriving. Margaret's pie customers wanted to contribute. The church took up a collection. The library where Margaret had volunteered sent a check. Even people William barely knew sent cards with money, with stories about how Margaret had touched their lives, how the Hartley family had been part of the community's fabric. William moved into a small apartment in town during the construction. It was temporary, just a place to sleep and eat until he figured out his long-term plans. Emily, Thomas, and Sophie had all gone back to their lives but visited regularly, checking on progress and making decisions about materials and design elements. The pavilion took shape slowly. They kept the oak tree at the center, building around it rather than despite it. The structure had a roof but open sides, allowing light and air to flow through. They installed benches made from reclaimed wood, created a stone pathway leading from the road to the pavilion, planted flowers that would bloom in different seasons, tulips for spring, roses for summer, chrysanthemums for fall, and holly bushes for winter color. The plaque was bronze, mounted on a stone at the base of the oak tree. It read, Margaret and Hartley 1956 to 2023. She made a house a home and taught us that the best foundations are built with love. But around that central plaque, they added something else. Smaller stones, arranged in a circle, each one engraved with a memory. First steps taken here, piano practice echoing through hallways, Thanksgiving dinners with too many guests, treehouse summers, Christmas morning laughter, pies cooling on the kitchen counter, bedtime stories that made us dream. 40 stones in total, one for each year the house had stood. Each memory was submitted by family or friends or neighbors. A collective remembering. A testament to the truth that a home isn't just the people who live in it, it's also the people who visit it, who are welcomed into it, who carry pieces of it with them when they leave. The dedication ceremony was held on a Saturday in early summer, exactly 1 year after Margaret's death. More than 100 people attended. Emily came with her husband and baby, who Margaret had never gotten to meet but who was named Margaret Rose in her honor. Thomas brought his fiancée, and they announced their wedding date at the gathering. Sophie came with a portfolio of paintings she'd created over the past year, all of them depicting the house from memory, all of them for sale with proceeds going to a scholarship fund they'd established in Margaret's name. William stood at the center of the pavilion, surrounded by his children and his extended family and his community, and tried to find words for what he felt. A year ago, he finally said, his voice shaking slightly, I lost my wife. 6 months ago, I lost the house I'd spent 40 years building. And I thought that was the end of something. The end of the life Margaret and I had created together. He paused, looking around at all the faces watching him. But standing here now, I realize I was wrong. What Margaret and I built wasn't made of wood or nails. It wasn't contained in those walls. It was this. He gestured to the crowd. It was people. Relationships. Love that spreads outward like ripples in water. Emily was crying. Thomas had his arm around his fiancée's shoulders. Sophie was recording everything on her phone, determined to capture this moment. This memorial isn't about the house that burned, William continued. It's about what the house represented. It's about Margaret's belief that home isn't a place, it's a feeling. It's knowing you're loved. It's being welcome. It's having space to grow and dream and become who you're meant to be. He touched the oak tree's trunk, its bark still scarred from the fire but covered now in new growth, fresh leaves sprouting from branches that had looked dead. This tree survived, William said. It was here before the house, and it's here after. It reminds us that some things endure. Not because they're invulnerable, but because their roots run deep. Margaret's love runs deep in all of us. The home she created exists in every person who learned what love looks like by watching her live. After William spoke, others shared their memories. Diane from the diner talked about how Margaret used to bring free pies for the staff every Thanksgiving. Frank Morrison told a story about the time William had helped him rebuild his deck, refusing payment, saying that's what neighbors do. One of Emily's childhood friends described sleepovers at the Hartley house, how Margaret always made everyone feel included, and how she'd stay up late listening to teenage girls talk about their dreams. Rodriguez, the fire chief, spoke too. She talked about responding to the fire, about watching William stand in his driveway with devastation written across his face. But then, she said, I watched this community rally. I watched this family find strength. And I realized that fire destroys structures, but it can't touch what really matters. The Hartley house was made of wood. The Hartley home is made of something that can't burn. When the ceremony ended, people lingered. They walked the pathways, read the memory stones, and sat on the benches. Children played in the grass where William and Margaret's children had once played. Someone brought a guitar and started playing hymns Margaret had loved. Food appeared. Casseroles and cookies and, of course, pies, because everyone knew Margaret's legacy. William found himself sitting on one of the benches with his 3 children gathered around him. Baby Margaret Rose was sleeping in Emily's arms. Thomas was holding his fiancée's hand. Sophie was leaning against the oak tree, her eyes closed, looking more peaceful than William had seen her in months. "Mom would have loved this," Emily said softly. "She would have cried through the whole ceremony," Thomas added with a small smile. "She would have made a pie," Sophie said, opening her eyes. "Something ridiculous and perfect, like strawberry rhubarb with a lattice crust." William felt his chest tighten with grief and gratitude all mixed together, impossible to separate. "She would have been proud of you 3. Of how you came together. Of how you loved each other through this. You taught us how," Emily said. "You and Mom. You showed us what it looks like to build something that lasts." As the afternoon wore into evening, the crowd thinned. People hugged William before leaving, pressed his hands, told him to call if he needed anything. By sunset, it was just the family remaining, William and his 3 children and their partners and baby Margaret Rose, sitting in a circle as the sky turned orange and pink and purple. "Dad," Thomas said, breaking a comfortable silence, "have you decided what you're going to do? What about the living situation?" William had been avoiding this question, even in his own mind. The apartment in town was fine temporarily, but it wasn't home. It was just a place to exist. He'd looked at other houses for sale and toured a few, but none of them felt right. They were other people's homes, other people's memories embedded in the walls. "I've been thinking," William said slowly, "about what home actually means. I spent 40 years believing it was that house. That structure. But sitting here now, looking at you 3, at the life you're building, I think home might be more flexible than I gave it credit for." "What does that mean?" Sophie asked. "It means," William said, "that maybe I don't need to recreate what was lost. Maybe I need to figure out what comes next. And I think what comes next involves being closer to you." Emily's eyes widened. "To us? But we're scattered across the country." "I know. That's the problem I've been wrestling with." "But Emily, you've been asking me to come stay with you for months." "Thomas, you said your town has a nice retirement community." "Sophie, even your tiny apartment in New York, you said you'd make it work." William smiled. "What if instead of trying to stay rooted in one place, I become a little more mobile? Like splitting time between us?" Thomas asked. "Something like that. Spend fall and winter with Emily, near my granddaughter. Spring with Thomas, maybe help him with coaching if he'll let me. Summers with Sophie, see what all the fuss is about with New York City. And in between, I can come back here, to this memorial, to this tree, to remember." He could see them processing this, working through the logistics in their minds. "That would be..." Emily started, then stopped, her eyes filling with tears. "Dad, that would be wonderful. The baby needs to know her grandfather. Really know him, not just through video calls. I could use your help with the team, actually," Thomas admitted. "You know the game better than most people. And having you around it would mean a lot." Sophie was nodding, tears streaming down her face. "I have so many places I want to show you in the city. Museums, parks, little cafes. I've been there 3 years, and I've never gotten to share it with you. Please, Dad. Please do this." "I'm 73 years old," William said. "I've lived my whole life in one place. This feels terrifying." "So was building a house from scratch," Emily pointed out. "So was raising 3 kids. So was losing Mom and keeping going anyway. You're the bravest person I know, Dad. Don't stop now." William moved out of the apartment 3 months later. He sold most of his furniture, keeping only what fit in his car and a small storage unit. The important things, the recovered photo albums, Margaret's letters, the warped piano frame that Emily wanted to keep, and the salvaged paintings, were divided among his children, pieces of their shared history distributed to their separate homes. His first stop was Emily's house in Pennsylvania. She prepared the guest room, hanging photos of the old house on the walls, placing Margaret's jewelry box on the dresser, and trying to make it feel familiar. But William told her not to worry about that. "I'm not trying to recreate the past," he said as she fussed over the room. "I'm trying to build something new." Living with Emily and her family was an adjustment. The house was loud in different ways, a baby crying at 3 a.m., morning cartoons, and the chaos of working parents trying to manage careers and childcare. But William found purpose in it. He learned to change diapers, to warm bottles, and to walk the floor with Margaret Rose when she was fussy. He cooked dinners when Emily worked late. He did laundry and dishes and repairs around the house, using the skills he'd developed over 40 years of homeownership. And he got to watch his granddaughter grow. Her first smile. Her first laugh. The way she'd reach for him when he walked into a room. Emily would find him sometimes, sitting in the rocking chair with the baby asleep on his chest, tears running down his face. "What's wrong?" she'd ask. "Nothing's wrong," he'd say. "I'm just grateful I didn't miss this." After 4 months with Emily, he moved to Thomas's town in California. Thomas had found him a small apartment in a senior living community, and William had been skeptical at first, worried it would feel like giving up, like admitting he was old and helpless. But the community surprised him. The residents were active, engaged, and full of life. He made friends quickly, other widowers, other people rebuilding their lives after loss. Thomas brought him to football practice, and the high school players initially saw him as just some old guy. But when William started offering quiet suggestions about footwork and positioning, when they realized he actually understood the game, they began seeking him out. He became an unofficial assistant coach, showing up to every practice and every game, becoming invested in these kids' success. One evening, after a particularly good win, one of the players, a quiet kid named Marcus who reminded William of Thomas at that age, came up to him. "Coach Hartley, can I ask you something?" "Of course. My dad left when I was 8. I don't really remember him teaching me anything. But you've taught me a lot this season. About football, but also about other stuff. About showing up. About keeping promises." Marcus looked down at his cleats. "I just wanted to say thanks." William's throat tightened. "Marcus, it's been my privilege. You remind me why I love being a father." That night, he called Thomas. "Thank you for bringing me here. For letting me be part of this." "Dad," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion, "you've always been part of everything. We just get to have you closer now." Spring bled into summer, and William moved to Sophie's tiny New York apartment. She'd been right, it was cramped. She gave him her bedroom and slept on the couch, refusing to let him argue. The city overwhelmed him at first. The noise, the crowds, the constant motion. He was a small-town man, used to space and quiet and knowing everyone he passed on the street. But Sophie became his guide, showing him the city through her eyes. They went to museums where she explained the art with a passion that reminded him of Margaret. They walked through Central Park, and she pointed out the spots where she'd come to cry after Margaret died, where she'd come to think about the house burning, and where she'd slowly started healing. "This bench," she said one afternoon, sitting down and patting the space beside her, "this is where I decided I wanted to be an artist for real. Not just for money, but for meaning. I sat here and thought about Mom, about how she always saw beauty in everything. And I thought, that's what I want to do with my life. Create beauty. Help people see it." "Your mother would be so proud of you," William said. "I'm proud of you," Sophie countered. "Do you know how hard it is to start over at 73? Most people wouldn't even try. They just give up. Settle. Stay stuck in grief. But you're building a new life, Dad. You're showing us it's never too late to be brave." William looked around the park, strangers everywhere, living their separate lives, all of them carrying their own losses and hopes and histories. "I'm not brave, honey. I'm just refusing to quit. There's a difference." "No," Sophie said firmly. "There isn't." By the time autumn arrived again, William had completed a full cycle through his children's homes. He'd been a grandfather, a coach, and a companion. He'd lived in 3 different states and adapted to 3 different rhythms. And he'd discovered something unexpected. He was good at this. at being flexible, building temporary homes instead of permanent structures. But he also discovered he needed to return periodically to Maple Ridge Road, to the memorial, to the oak tree. It was still his anchor, even as he let himself drift. He came back on the anniversary of the fire. 2 years had passed since that night he'd woken to smoke and watched 40 years burn. The memorial was thriving now. The flowers Sophie had chosen were in full bloom. The grass was lush and green. The oak tree's new growth had filled in beautifully, and you could barely see the fire scars unless you knew where to look. William sat on one of the benches, alone in the early morning. The town was quiet around him. He could hear birds, wind in the leaves, and the distant sound of traffic on the main road. Peaceful. He closed his eyes and let himself remember. Building the foundation in the summer heat. Margaret is bringing him lemonade. The first wall going up. Emily's birth. Thomas is learning to ride a bike. Sophie painting her murals. Family dinners. Christmas mornings. Margaret's laugh. The piano music. Basketball in the driveway. Ordinary moments that became precious only in retrospect. The house was gone. Margaret was gone. That entire life was gone. But William was still here. His children were thriving. His granddaughter was growing. He'd helped a high school football team win a championship. He changed diapers and explored museums and learned to navigate subway systems. He'd made new friends, adapted to new places, and built new routines. He'd thought the fire had destroyed everything. But sitting here now, he realized it had actually revealed something he should have known all along. What he built with Margaret wasn't the house. It was the family. And families don't burn. They bend, they adapt, and they find new forms. But they endure. I thought you might be here. William opened his eyes. Emily was walking up the path, pushing Margaret Rose in a stroller. Thomas was with her, arm around his new wife. Sophie brought up the rear, carrying a picnic basket. "What are you all doing here?" William asked, surprised. "I thought." "We coordinated," Emily said, smiling. "We all took the same week off. We wanted to be here with you. On the anniversary. We brought lunch," Sophie added. "And pie. I found a recipe that's supposed to be close to Mom's strawberry rhubarb." They spread a blanket in the grass near the pavilion. Baby Margaret Rose, now 15 months old and walking, toddled around exploring, fascinated by everything. Thomas's wife, Rachel, fit seamlessly into their dynamic, laughing at their inside jokes and listening attentively to their stories. They ate and talked and remembered. Sophie had brought her portfolio, and they went through the paintings she'd made of the house, each one capturing a different room, a different angle, and a different memory. Thomas had a video on his phone from the last Thanksgiving they'd all spent in the house together, before Margaret got sick. They watched it together, crying and laughing at the same time, at how young they all looked, how healthy Margaret looked, how normal everything had seemed. "I found something," Emily said, pulling a folder from her bag. "When I was organizing the storage unit last month. Letters Dad wrote to Mom when they were engaged." She handed the folder to William. He opened it carefully, seeing his own handwriting from 50 years ago, young and hopeful and deeply in love. He couldn't read them now, not with his children watching. But he held them carefully, these pieces of a young man's heart. "Read one," Sophie said. "Please?" William pulled out a letter at random. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded. He cleared his throat and began. "My dearest Margaret, I can't stop thinking about the land we looked at today. You were right, that oak tree is special. I can already see it. A house where we'll grow old. Children playing in the yard. A whole life unfolding under those branches. I promise you I'll build it. I'll build us a home that's worthy of the love I feel when I look at you. A place where we can be completely ourselves. A place our children will always want to return to. I'm not a wealthy man, Margaret. I can't give you mansions or jewels. But I can give you this, a home built by hands that love you. Walls that will protect you. Windows that will frame your smile every morning. That's my promise. Forever yours, William." The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Emily was crying. Sophie was crying. Even Thomas had to wipe his eyes. "You kept that promise, Dad," Emily finally said. "The house burned, but the promise didn't. We still have that home. We carry it with us." As the afternoon stretched toward evening, they walked the property together, all of them, 3 generations of Hartleys plus Rachel. Baby Margaret Rose held William's hand, toddling unsteadily, laughing when she stumbled. They showed her the memory stones, read them out loud, explaining to her in simple terms about the grandmother she'd never meet but whose name she carried. "When she's older," Emily said, "I'll bring her here every year. I'll tell her stories about Grandma Margaret and about the house that used to stand here. About how Grandpa built it with his own hands. And how it burned down," Thomas added, "but how that wasn't the end. How we all came together and built something else. Something better, maybe," Sophie said thoughtfully. "Not more beautiful or more impressive. But something that reflects who we actually are, a family that adapts, that survives, that finds new ways to love each other even when circumstances change." William listened to his children, watched his granddaughter play, and felt a peace settle over him that he hadn't felt since before Margaret's diagnosis. Not happiness exactly, because grief was still there, still present. But something close to wholeness. Like a broken bone that had healed stronger at the break. "I want to tell you something," William said, gathering his children's attention. "I spent 2 years grieving what I'd lost. The house, your mother, the life we built. And that grief was real and necessary. But sitting here today, I realized something. I was grieving the wrong thing." They looked at him, waiting. "I thought I'd lost everything when the house burned. I thought that without that structure, without those walls, the evidence of our life together was gone. But that was never true. The house was just a container. What mattered was always the content. You 3. The love your mother and I shared. The values we tried to teach. The memories we made. Those things exist independent of any structure." He gestured to the memorial around them. "This place is beautiful. Sophie designed it perfectly. But it's not why we're here today. We're here because we choose to be. Because we decided that even though we're scattered, even though life has pulled us in different directions, we're still a family. We still show up for each other." "That's what you taught us," Emily said. "You and Mom. That family isn't just proximity or tradition. It's intentionality. It's choosing to love even when it's hard." William nodded. "Your mother used to say that home isn't where you are, it's who you're with." I didn't really understand that when she said it. I was too focused on the physical house, on maintaining this one location. But now I get it. I've lived in 3 different states this year, and I've been home in all of them. Because you were there. Thomas squeezed his father's shoulder. "We're going to keep doing this, Dad. The rotation. Having you with us. It's not a burden or an obligation. It's a privilege. You're teaching us how to age with grace. How to stay connected across distance. How to rebuild after loss." "I don't know about grace," William said with a small smile. "Some days I feel like I'm barely holding it together." "That's what grace looks like," Sophie said. "Not perfection. Not having all the answers. Just showing up and trying and loving people even when you're broken." The sun was setting now, painting the sky in colors that reminded William of the night of the fire. But this time, the orange and pink and purple didn't feel cruel. They felt appropriate. Like nature's way of acknowledging that endings are part of the cycle, that destruction makes space for creation, and that every sunset promises another sunrise. They stayed until the stars came out, the same as they had on the dedication day. Baby Margaret Rose fell asleep in Emily's arms. Rachel and Thomas sat close together, talking quietly about their wedding and about the family they wanted to build. Sophie was sketching again, capturing this moment in charcoal lines. William stood and walked to the oak tree, pressing his palm against its trunk the way Sophie had done 2 years ago. The bark was rough under his hand, scarred but alive. New growth everywhere. He thought about Margaret, about how she'd stood on this property 40+ years ago, pregnant and hopeful, seeing possibilities where there was only empty land. She'd been right about everything. This place was special. Not because of what he'd built on it, but because of what it had witnessed. It had been the staging ground for a life well lived. For a love that produced 3 incredible humans. For ordinary moments that accumulated into an extraordinary story. "I miss you," William whispered to the tree, to the night, to Margaret wherever she was. "But I'm okay. The kids are okay. We're doing what you always wanted. We're loving each other, taking care of each other, and building our own lives while staying connected. I think you'd be proud." The wind rustled the leaves above him, and William chose to believe that was Margaret's answer. "Yes. I'm proud. Keep going." He turned back to his family, gathered together in the memorial they'd built from ashes. Emily had woken up baby Margaret Rose and was pointing out stars. Thomas was laughing at something Rachel said. Sophie was showing someone her sketch. They were here, alive, together despite everything that had tried to pull them apart. William had built a house once. 40 years of his life poured into wood and nails and careful measurements. And he'd watched it burn, watched 40 years turn to ash in a single night. But what he'd actually built, the foundation that truly mattered, was still standing. Still strong. Still growing. His children didn't need a house to return to. They needed a father who showed up. Who loved them. Who demonstrated that loss doesn't have to mean the end of everything. That you can rebuild in different ways. That home is portable, flexible, and resilient. "Come on, Dad," Emily called. "We're making wishes on stars. Your turn." William walked back to his family, sat down in their circle, and looked up at the infinite sky. There were so many things he could wish for. Margaret is back. The house was restored. Time rewound to when his children were small and everything felt possible. But instead, he wished for what he already had. For the strength to keep showing up. For the wisdom to appreciate the present instead of mourning the past. For more days like this, surrounded by people he loved, honoring what was lost while embracing what remained. He'd built a house once. And then he'd watched it burn. But he'd built something better too. Something fire couldn't touch. Something that would outlast any structure. He built a family. And they had built him right back. "You know what I've learned?" William said, breaking the comfortable silence. His children turned to look at him, faces soft in the starlight. "I spent my whole life thinking a man's legacy was measured by what he could build with his hands. A house. A career. Something tangible and permanent. But that's not it at all." He paused, making sure they were listening, wanting them to really hear this. "A man's true legacy is measured by what continues after he's gone. Not structures, but people. Not possessions, but values. Not what he accumulated, but what he gave away. Love, most of all. Because love is the only thing we build that never truly burns. It transforms, it adapts, and it finds new forms. But it endures." Emily reached over and took his hand. Thomas put his arm around his father's shoulders. Sophie leaned against him, the way she used to when she was small. "The fire didn't destroy what mattered," William continued. "It just taught me to see it more clearly. You 3, and now Rachel, and baby Margaret Rose, and whoever else joins this family, you're what I built. And you're magnificent." He looked around at each of them, committing this moment to memory. Not with a photograph or a video, but with his heart. Because that's where the moments that truly matter are stored. In the spaces between heartbeats. In the warmth of hands held. In the knowledge that you loved and were loved in return. "So yes," William said, "I built a house for my family. And then I watched it burn. But the family survived. The love survived. And in the end, that's all that ever really mattered." The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and indifferent and beautiful. The oak tree stood sentinel, scarred and alive. And the Hartley family sat together in a circle on land that had witnessed their entire story, knowing that some foundations are made of concrete and wood, but the strongest ones are made of choice and commitment, and the daily decision to love each other despite everything that makes love hard. That was the rail house William had built. And it would stand long after he was gone. As they packed up to leave, William took one last look at the property. In the darkness, he could almost see it. The house as it used to be. Lights glowing in every window. Smoke rising from the chimney. The sound of piano music drifting into the night. Children's laughter. Margaret's voice calling everyone to dinner. But then the image faded, and he saw what was really there. The memorial. The pavilion. The oak tree. The memory stones. And his family, walking together toward their cars, carrying pieces of the picnic. Sophie holding baby Margaret Rose, Emily and Thomas laughing about something, and Rachel fitting right in like she'd always been there. Both versions were true, William realized. The house that was and the family that is. The past and the present. The loss and the love that survived it. He climbed into Emily's car, and they drove away from Maple Ridge Road, leaving the memorial lit only by starlight. But William would be back. In a few months, after another rotation through his children's homes, he'd return to sit under that oak tree and remember. Because that's what you do with the things you love and lose. You remember them. You honor them. You let them shape you into something stronger. And then you keep building. Keep loving. Keep showing up. Until the day when you can't anymore, and then you trust that what you've built will continue without you, because the best foundations don't require their builder to remain. They stand on their own. They support new growth. They become the ground from which others build their own dreams. William Hartley had built a house for his family. He'd watched it burn. And then he discovered that what he'd actually built, what had mattered all along, was indestructible. In the end, we don't build our lives from wood and nails, but from love and memory and the courage to begin again. The strongest homes aren't structures. They're the connections that survive every fire, every loss, and every reason to give up. Because family isn't a place you return to. It's the people you carry with you, no matter where you go.